Welcome to the Rating Room, the podcast where we unpack everything NatHERs. I'm Brian Haynes, and alongside me are my co-hosts Matthew Graham and Andrew Hooper. We dive into the technical, the practical, and sometimes the controversial side of residential energy efficiency assessments in Australia. If you're working in the field of NatHERs or just trying to navigate the space, this is where the ratings get real. Let's get into it. Tonight we are discussing heating and cooling loads, capped heating and cooling loads, which were introduced into NCC 2019. We had a 12-month grace period, so we all started that in 2020. Did you want to cover off on that, Matthew?
Well, I thought I'd first start off with, what's a heating and cooling load, so we can understand heating and cooling load caps.
What is a heating and cooling load? What are they all about?
Yeah. Okay. So on a cold winter's day, your heater has to work hard to keep your living room warm, right? So the total amount of energy that needs to get pumped in, I guess, over the whole year, just to keep things comfortable, that's your heating load. All right. Same in works for summer. Okay. So this is the amount of energy this time that your air conditioner would need to pull that out of the house. That's your cooling load, all right? So both measured in megajoules per metre squared per annum, which is essentially just a unit that tells you how much energy is needed relative to the size of the house.
And what are we doing with those loads, and why is there a cap? What is the reason for that, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, no, another good question. So, why do we actually need sort of separate sort of load limits, I guess, on top of what we've already got, which was a star rating. So in theory, you could theoretically, I guess, just design a house that sort of scored really well on a star rating. Okay, so you could, like in a cool climate, you can just make it great in winter, right? So lots of insulation, great orientation. But then, of course, summer rolls around and then you sort of the house bakes, okay, because nobody really thought about sort of shading or airflow, ventilation, those sort of things. So the overall score looks fine on paper, but the house is pretty miserable, between sort of December and February. So really, that's why the rules were introduced, to actually have these sort of separate heating and cooling load limits that sort of sit over the top of the star rating. So you can't ignore, you can't sort of get, a pass on one and sort of ignore the other. You got to pass on both. But it's not just actually passing on both of those. You also need to independently pass on the total as well.
Yeah,
right?
So the total load relates to the star rating itself, as per the star bands, the NatHERS star bands. But then we've got the heating and cooling load, which are separate metrics that need to be adhered to. So you need to be below those specific caps for each climate zone. And then the total load is the addition of the heating load and the cooling load together.
That's right.
So we need to meet each of the three metrics, or the house doesn't comply.
Correct. Except for in New South Wales under BASICs.
Yeah, on climate zone, or NatHERS climate zones 9, 10 and 11. Yeah.
I might backtrack a little bit on that too. It actually came in before NCC 2019 because it came in for apartments in Victoria a couple of years before that, because the apartments were, they were finding the ones on the north and the west were absolutely stinking hot. And there was, everything complied, but these were rotten. So yeah, the Vic government brought them in under the planning schemes for apartments, class 2, and then ABCB or NCC followed up, mandating it in all homes and apartments.
Yeah, I remember the ESD requirements, and the cooling load was 21 megajoules per metre squared or something like that.
For Melbourne City, I think.
It's Metro Melbourne, yeah. Well, actually not Metro Melbourne, because they literally had nothing, but yeah, just out. So from my understanding with all of this, the development behind all these capped heating and cooling loads was to stop hot boxes in summer and let's just say, coolers in winter. Do you know how it was all developed? Like what study was done, the calculations behind it, and how all of this even happened?
Look, I won't pretend to know the detail of it. There was a lot. The documents are online that you can go back and reread of them. You can look at the requests made before the study was done, what the study involved. I think there's a couple of different study papers, and then the regulatory impact statement that came from it. So there's a fair bit, but the gist of it was, off the top of my head, that it was something like 170,000 homes. Their modelling results were looked at from the Australian Housing Data Portal. Looked at different climate zones and came up with percentiles of what the limits were. Then part of the study involved looking at a number of set designs in set locations, in different orientations, different materials, maybe, I'm not sure about that one. And from that, a heck of a lot of research to come up with the figures that they came up with. Way over my head, like I said, I don't pretend to understand all the details, but I know there was a lot in it to develop it.
Yeah, I remember looking at the graphs in the regulatory impact statement, and it was like all the dots centering as they went, and then there were these outliers like scooting off out into oblivion, and they were the ones.
Might have been 5% or the 95th percentile.
Yeah, they're the ones that were discounted in this type of case.
Outliers.
Yeah, these are the outliers, the ones that obviously don't get picked up, and that's the exact reason for doing that. So it does make sense when you think about it. So I completely understand why it was done.
From what I remember, I did look at the study sort of not too long ago. The request was made to make sure that a house fell into a comfortable zone. So that was the defining feature initially, I think. We now sort of transition into the floor, type of floor, whether it's a suspended floor or a concrete floor which drove it. I don't remember whether that was part of the original study or not, but I think it had an influence.
Yeah, I don't actually know. I mean, I know it's a big factor in how you select what those capped heating and cooling loads are going to be, but, you know, I don't know what the reasoning behind that was.
The houses were a mixture of both, different floor constructions, concrete slab on ground and suspended timber floor.
No, in terms of general modelling, or energy within a building.
Yeah.
We know that a concrete slab's going to have thermal mass. It's going to have an effect. We know a timber floor is going to be different. It doesn't have the thermal mass parts. It's off the ground. It's not coupled.
It's just, that's really about just the sort of the way that the energy flows, isn't it? It's the... So
yeah, that's all good and well with the star rating itself, but like, why does the selection of the actual floor type, whether it's suspended or it's coupled to the ground, actually make a difference in those specific heat and load requirements that we need to adhere to? That kind of thing, I still can't wrap my head around why it matters. Like, aren't we just trying to get rid of those 95 percentiles, as you said?
No, they're the outliers.
Yep.
There are still houses that are built with either concrete slab on ground or a suspended timber or a combination of the both, right? So with a suspended timber floor, you've got the air movement underneath the floor, right? So that's going to make it a lot more difficult to achieve a stable temperature, right? Whereas with a concrete slab on ground, you don't have that. You have either ground coupling or could be decoupled with some insulation. So, but that winter heat loss and heat gain for the summer is different. So they perform differently. Therefore, you have to have different heating and cooling load limits to be able to accommodate the fundamental different floor construction, especially as the floor constructions are fairly large or significant component of an overall rating.
You've got the same total load, doesn't matter whether you're suspended or your concrete slab on ground, it's still the same total load. Why would it make a difference what the capped heating and cooling load is depending on what floor system you actually select? I'm still not quite understanding how that works. Am I making sense at all?
You are. I'm just trying to think of what the answer is. I mean, if we took the same house and optimised it, let's say we started off with a concrete slab, and we optimised that to 7 stars. If we put it on a timber floor, we're not going to hit 7 stars. Okay, depending on the climate zone and all that. I'm just thinking Melbourne timber floor will be harder to reach 7 stars to start with. Because you're losing that coupling, you're losing that mass. There's factors at play. So do you want to get penalised by saying that you should have the same scenario or the same outcomes for heating, shall we say, in Melbourne, for both a slab and a timber floor, if a timber floor is harder to hit target? Adversely, if you're in Queensland, a timber floor might be better because you can let that heat escape through the floor better, where the concrete would retain it, so it would be harder to achieve compliance with a slab in Queensland. I mean, you do a lot of Queensland work. I don't.
Never. I mean, you always have issues with cooling loads, but generally it's quite easy to mitigate against that with ceiling fans and colours and all of those types of things. And, to be perfectly honest, I don't know whether that scale inverts as you head further up the country, whether it becomes easier or harder to comply with a suspended timber subfloor or not, depending on whether you are in Victoria or Queensland. Do you guys know whether those numbers invert or not? Because, I mean, that would, if they did, that would make sense with what you were just saying.
I don't do enough work out of Victoria to have a confidence in answering that.
Yeah.
Mine is predominantly in a cooling climate. I would think in the back of my head that at the two extremes you're going to have two different situations, and sort of in the centre it's probably having less of effect. I just don't do enough jobs in enough climate zones to know.
But if we just get back to your original question, I think what Andrew's saying is that the expected level of thermal comfort is still the same, depending on whether you're building with a suspended timber floor or a concrete floor. You're still expecting a 7 stars. You're still expecting that as your sort of, minimum level of thermal comfort. But
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
Keep going. You're right on the mark here.
But it is more difficult, and the way that's actually, if you look at the heating and cooling loads of a suspended timber floor and a concrete, they are going to be quite different. They're going to have a different balance of heating and cooling.
So we're basically saying because it's the systems are so dramatically different with their makeup of those two specific metrics that you could not have a one-size-fits-all for the different floor types, because they behave so completely differently.
And that's also where we actually have a combination of the two as well, right?
Yes.
Which we'll probably get to. Mm-hmm. But that's also to recognise that some projects are not strictly built with either just a suspended timber floor or just a concrete slab on ground.
Yeah.
And I think if you go back to the original studies that were done for all of this, they had multiple different once they got past the Australian housing data part, and they used specific houses and modelled them in different climate zones, I think you'll find that certain designs performed better here than what they did over there, and then that increased the data they had to be able to formulate it. So, for instance, there was a Queenslander type building where it was just a garage and I think service rooms downstairs. Performed better in Queensland or in a hotter climate. I think they used it in Darwin, maybe. Not sure.
It was tropical.
Tropical, yeah. I'm just thinking Darwin didn't make it into the study because they weren't going through with it, so I can't remember. But yeah, that house performed better in a Queensland or tropical environment than it did in a southern environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for anybody following along at home that actually does not do NatHERS assessments, do you guys want to cover off on how this is actually selected within the NatHERS software and what we need to do?
Okay, the eyes are on me. All right, so the NCC calls up, it doesn't, it's not actually in the NCC, it just says that under the specification that you've got to comply with the heating and cooling load limits standard, which is a separate document. You download that separately from ABCB, and it outlays all the targets, all the limits. The rest of the standard talks about the type of floor. So it does determine the living space. The lowest living area is the wording it uses.
Yeah, that is correct. The lowest living
lowest
area.
living area of the house. If it's on a concrete slab, then you would use one set of figures. If it's on a suspended floor, you use a second set of figures.
And the glossary defines?
The glossary. Okay.
I mean, this is where it really gets interesting, isn't it? You
Well,
know, because yes, you get the floor type of the lowest, living area, which is actually a phrase that carries a lot of weight, isn't it?
Has
It's
two different
actually-
meanings.
It's quite difficult to actually find documentation that actually sort of supports this when you actually go in and sort of delve a little bit deeper.
How about we say that it's impossible to find a document that supports this? So let's have a look at...
Maybe we should cover what the standard glossary does
that's-
include,
yeah.
because it does include, there is an entry there for living area only.
Correct. So let's have a look at, again, what Andrew was saying, the ABCB NatHERS heating and cooling load limit standard. Now, you can look at it in clause 2.3, and it actually says that the limits are determined by the floor type of the lowest living area, and the glossary defines that living area as a conditioned area of a dwelling, including a living, kitchen and or kitchen living zone.
Yeah, which is a NatHERS definition, that one. So it's really just deferring across to the NatHERS software documentation for that definition, right? So, I mean, the key phrase there, I think, is defined, right? It's defined by NatHERS. It's sort of a little incomplete at face value, right?
It's okay. So hang on. Let's just back up a little bit. You're right. You're absolutely 100% correct in what you're saying. It is referring to NatHERS, and you can see it clearly with the way it's saying living and all of that.
Yeah, it's not fully resolved in this document on its own.
Correct. And then, but when you look at other documentation, for example, the universal certificate, if you look at that, it clearly defines it as the lowest conditioned area, which is something different again. And then you look at, again, I'm just going to say from FR5 point of view, it says floor type of the lowest conditioned zone. So we're talking about zones, we're talking about conditioned areas, we're talking about living areas.
Well, I think actually fundamentally we also have a problem with lowest as well. Not only is the type of the zone got a big question mark over it, it's also lowest is not really clearly defined either. So it's...
Well, the additional information does say typically
It gives an
will be
example.
the ground floor of the home.
Yeah.
But if there is a garage under it, you might
This is
find
just
it's
one
the garage.
example.
So
It's just one
yeah,
example
it's
that
one
they
example,
give.
But
You know,
to me, it starts to say conditioned is your living space. Not forget living zone as a zone in NatHERS, but a living space is where people live. That can include bedrooms or studies or lounge rooms or whatever. So, and that definition you pulled up, can you read that again, please?
The floor type of the lowest living area, and the glossary defines living area as a conditioned area of a dwelling, including a living, kitchen, and/or kitchen living zone. Very limited choices there.
As defined by NatHERS.
As well, that's in the ABCB documentation, which is probably pulled from NatHERS. I think we can comfortably say that.
So I'm going to be argumentative here and say where are the commas in that?
Okay, so
In the ABCB definition.
Okay, living, comma, kitchen, two separate items.
No, the comma starts before that.
No.
So a conditioned.
Oh yeah, true. A conditioned area. Oh, I see
So
what
a
you're
conditioned
getting
area,
at.
comma,
Okay.
which includes these zones, comma, as defined by NatHERS. So,
You've got to love these commas, right?
so if you take out that including and just end up with a conditioned zone as defined by NatHERS. So therefore, is a daytime and nighttime a conditioned zone as defined by NatHERS? The including, it's not
It could be
saying-
like example. For example,
Yeah, it's not saying exclusively living, kitchen, lounge. It's saying including. It could be anything. And that's what makes it really difficult, because why don't they say including bedroom, including...
Yeah, I guess you could define every
they
single...
could list all
No,
of. They could list all
to
of.
me, those commas are detrimental to that statement. And I think if you work between the commas and take out the, it could include, you're sort of left with a statement saying it's all conditioned zones.
Yeah, I agree with you. A conditioned area of a dwelling. Full stop.
Yeah.
Except there's a comma there, but if you just said it was full stop, you're right. The rest,
And-
including the living, you could have got rid of all of that.
For me, I feel like that goes to the intent.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
All right. It's probably not what we're actually used to. In NatHERS, we're used to more formal or prescriptive definitions, and this is one that's sort of lacking that sort of formal definition, really. So I think, that that lowest living area is just this one key word. It's sort of like an incomplete sort of definition, doesn't it? That sort of points sort of off stage, right? And then another key word that really just has no definition at all. And that combination is well, look, it's not, let's face it, it's just not good for consistency, right? I think NatHERS as a scheme strives for not just accuracy, but I think it also sort of strives for consistency. And this one's just, there's just too much room for interpretation on this one between assessors, I feel.
Yeah. And I think this sort of extends further to what you were just saying before, that, we have this word living that can just mean so much. We look at the NatHERS tech note and the handbook, which talks about the living zone as separately from a living space. It uses both of those terminologies, like an outdoor living space. Well, it's not a living zone. But to find that step, that line between a living zone and a space that you live in.
And let's look at
is
some
what
of the
makes it
other
very difficult.
NatHERS rules, right? So you get one kitchen living, you're limited to 2 living, but other zones after that are still considered as, conditioned zones. They could be living zones, but they become daytime zones. So again, it's sort of like, I feel that, opens it up a little bit more sort of broadly to, to considering the conditioned building envelope.
Yeah, so that leads me to my next question then. So say, for example, you have a reverse living type house, and let's just say on the ground floor, there's a garage, there's a study, there's a rumpus room, there's a laundry, and there's a stairwell. And you walk upstairs, and that's where all the living areas are, the kitchen, the living bedrooms, and all of those types of things. Let's just pose that scenario. Now, you've also got more than 2 living zones upstairs. So your living zone on the ground floor has to be a day conditioned zone. Now, we're assuming that's a conditioned zone, and that would mean that it was the ground floor when we select our heating and cooling loads. We're all good there with that scenario because there's a condition zone on the ground floor.
I think so, yeah.
So let's take out
I'm okay. I
Yep.
think it's following the
rules.
well, they're not so much the rules, but it's following the intent of the condition building envelope.
Yep. Let's now take out that living area that is a day condition because we've run out of living zones in the house. And now we're back to a study and a laundry and a stairwell. We're still good with that being the lowest condition zone.
Yeah, you've got a study
You've got a
down there,
study
so
there.
people
Yep.
are going to
Okay.
be using that in some function for a length of time.
Okay. Let's take out the study.
Yep.
Now we're left with a garage, a laundry, and a stairwell. Now the stairwell is still a day conditioned zone. Are we still saying that the ground floor is
So you're pushing the love on this one.
Yeah, the defining factor for the heating and cooling load?
I go back to the house I mentioned before that was in the study where they only had a garage and service rooms downstairs and then they had whatever upstairs. I don't recall the floor plan exactly. I don't know if there was a staircase going from the ground floor up to the top floor, but that's what you're saying. So does the staircase alone constitute a conditioned space, a living space by fact it's conditioned?
That's right, but is it a living space or is it a conditioned area? Like, what are we really saying?
I'll
here?
go beyond that question and then say, what is the staircase connected to? Is there an entry down there? Is there outside air movement coming into an entry space and up the stairs, or is it just connected to a laundry and a garage? So
Come on, I want to go the double height void zone. So like
starting to get into more
which is now starting
hypotheticals.
to add the conditioning of the upper level to the lower one. So yeah.
Okay, well let's just let's go both scenarios then. Let's just say our staircase, just you walk up and it's just into the kitchen, living, dining zone. I'm sure, like, we see that a lot. That's not something out of the ordinary at all.
Is there glazing?
Yeah, there's glazing throughout.
I'm just adding another scenario.
Let's say there's no glazing in the stairwell itself. Let's just say, I don't know, it's cut into a hill or something like that. You're walking up the stairs and that's where all the living rooms are.
I think it's really going to get back to
it's on a suspended timber subfloor on the first floor. So it's concrete slab on ground because that's where the garage is. You walk up the stairs and it's all open and it's a suspended timber subfloor on the first floor because it's a double story, but it's cut into the side of a mountain.
If you're reading this as, the way that Andrew was sort of suggesting, depending on where you put all the commas, as being a conditioned area of a dwelling, then it does have conditioned
As defined by NatHERS.
That's right, as defined, that's right.
NatHERS defines the stairwell
It
as
does,
conditioned.
it is conditioned.
So now what happens if I put a door on top of the stairwell?
As in enclosing it into an empty space. Well,
Yeah.
the
Doesn't really
conditioning
change
hasn't
anything.
changed. It's still defined by NatHERS as being a conditioned space.
And it would still be a daytime zone.
Correct, no change.
That's my interpretation. Maybe this is an example where you would model it one way, model it the other way, and go to your AAO and have a chat with them and say, this
I'm
is
not
what it
sure.
is.
Is that really necessary? I mean, it's circulation space. The circulation space will be daytime.
Yeah, for me, it's probably not necessary, but you're asking a question where obviously, I think you got something in mind that, you're wanting it to go somewhere and you're saying, well, the bulk of the living, where people are living, not just circulating, is on the upper level, so why not? You'd have to be consistent as well in saying if you're going to do that in a tropical climate where it might be better, you're going to have to do it in a colder climate where it's going to be really bad as well.
Oh, your rules would have to be consistent no matter where you're doing the assessment.
And I think that's where you keep coming back to that definition of living as defined by NatHERS and saying, that's my rule and I'm going to be consistent with that.
So it's not really a living area. It is a conditioned space. I mean, that's the way I interpret it.
Well-
a conditioned space.
That definition again, a living space is a conditioned space as defined by NatHERs.
Yeah. So we can't. We got to stop saying live-in area.
Yeah.
We got to say
I
conditioned
think
space.
living is too broad.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree.
Possibly to fix this up, refer to a conditioned space and then just list, for example, it could be some of these. And it would be good if one of those conditioned zones was a nighttime zone, so they weren't all daytime. Because nighttime's
You
still
lost me too.
because nighttime's still conditioned, right? All of the examples that they're using there, the three examples, the living, the kitchen living, I mean, they're all daytime use.
But you
right?
can't. You won't be able to have a
So
nighttime zone on a ground floor without having some other type of zone attached to it, which would form part of the conditions of what it says. So you couldn't have a nighttime on its own.
It's just a conditioned area of the dwelling, and here are some examples, right? If you were to rewrite that instead of having a conditioned area of the dwelling, including living, kitchen, and or kitchen living zone. I mean, we don't actually have a kitchen zone strictly on its own. The kitchen on its own is a kitchen living. It's a zone that doesn't really exist. There's no strict kitchen only zone.
Because it's not so common these days in design.
So including a living, kitchen, and or kitchen living zone, the middle one doesn't exist on its own.
Just get rid of the examples and just have it a conditioned area of a dwelling.
A conditioned area of a dwelling, and then if you must have some examples, include a range of examples.
Yeah.
There's a heap of in the tech note. There's a stack of examples. There's like a glossary of about 25, 30 different room
in
types.
Appendix 1, you mean all of
Yeah,
the... Yes,
yeah,
there is. It's quite
yeah.
extensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I think it's really difficult when you actually cherry pick a few.
Yeah, for sure. It just makes things worse.
Well, I mean, even living zone, it's just a temperature profile, isn't it? Ultimately. So
Occupancy profile.
temperature as well. It
That's- yes.
varies.
Temperature and time
Yeah,
and
okay.
occupancy.
But yeah, it's
That-
a profile.
and it might have...
It's still
It has some,
as
some
conditioned as anything else, but
cooking gains and
it
things
just
like
might
that.
have different times
Yeah, that's
and
right.
people's.
That's right.
Do you think it's based on that? Like that condition profile, like occupancy profile, let's say, because a doored off stairwell is certainly going to have a very different occupancy profile than a kitchen living zone will.
I don't think it's as complex as that. I think it's just looking at the, the condition building envelope,
Yeah.
which is principally what we're doing in NatHERS.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we can read anything more into it.
So who's ringing up the ABCB to get this sorted out?
You are.
Yeah, sure.
I'm not doing anything of the sort.
Look, this has been out for 6 years. I don't think it's
Yeah.
going to change per se. I mean,
I think clarification would be good, though.
I like black and white.
Yeah, I do
I
too.
like things laid out precisely. There's new tech notes, new guidance notes coming out. Maybe there'll be more information in there one day. I would like that. I hate grey zones. I hate looking at things and saying, well, I could do this or I could do that. I want answers.
What about a NCC 2025 heating and cooling load document from the ABCB, and they just fix this up and a couple of other things and we'd be good to go?
I think it could be just mentioned in the heating and cooling load limit standard. Maybe that's where
That's the one.
that's where it probably should belong.
Yeah.
And
It doesn't need to because it's as defined by NatHERS. So ABCB's handballed it. They're
Where did
saying
it
it's
say that?
in the glossary for living.
I'm going to check that.
the
out.
standard glossary has an entry for living area.
Yep.
Yes. And I think if Andrew's right, it defers to the NatHERS software documentation, right? So it's
No, it just says
yeah,
as defined by NatHERS.
which is referring to the NatHERS
Yeah.
documentation, which would then define it. I mean, I like black and white as well, but I think consistency as for me would would be the really driving thing why you would try to clarify this a little bit more. It's, just don't want the interpretation. I guess that's, you just don't want the grey, right?
Yes.
It's the same thing. You might interpret it one way, I might interpret it another. Brian might go another way again.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, Andrew. It literally says as defined by NatHERS.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think take ABCB out of the equation.
Yeah.
They've said whatever they say. So I would like NatHERS in a utopia that we live in. I would like NatHERS to come back and say the caps apply in these exact situations. Move on. Nothing to see.
Yeah, we so like I was saying, this was introduced in 2020, so 6 years old now. I don't know, about two or 3 years ago, we were dealing with a builder who was doing 50 to 100 houses a year, all kind of like half volume, half custom kind of houses. Lots of glass, lots of return walls, lots of intricate geometry going on with those houses. And when we were assessing them, we were pretty consistently, like every handful of houses, let's say, having major cooling load issues. Obviously, to counteract that, there's not a whole lot you can do in a Victorian in a colder climate zone. Low SHGC basically is a good thing to battle that. A lot of fans, opening windows and so on. And they question, why is this always happening? Because we'd just taken over the work. Why is this always happening? And we got a hold of some of the previous NatHERS assessments that had been done for them, and the heating or the cooling load was not looked at all. This is in NCC 2019, prior to the heating and cooling load caps being written on the universal certificate. So you still had, 4 years where you could have been doing NCC 2019, not complying with the cooling load caps in Victoria. No one would have been the wiser if they didn't actually look at it. So all of these energy reports that have been done, none of them comply. That's a pretty egregious issue that's going on there.
Especially when you consider that could seriously affect an occupant. Heat exhaustion, what's the next stage up? Heat exhaustion,
Death.
stroke. If your living space is too hot and there's a lot of studies now about climate safe rooms. Is your total envelope too cold that you can go to a room and take shelter in? Is your total environment too hot so that there's a room that you can go and take shelter in? This is being recognised more and more beyond the heating and cooling caps and existing homes as well. So I think that's just ludicrous to not have looked at the caps when they were existing. It could potentially put someone's life in danger.
Yeah, big problem. But another example of why we need to talk about these types of things so that people do understand what they're looking at and know what to look out for. And I think at some point in time, it might be good for us to actually go through a NatHERS certificate piece by piece and talk about what the things are to look for, because there's just not enough of that auditing process happening at building permit stage and during construction, post-construction, to make sure everything aligns up with the NatHERS certificate.
I mean, the NatHERS software is still shows you whether you're actually complying with the heating and cooling load limits.
It does with NCC 2022, but not with 2019.
It does do that. Also,
in small numbers, though.
Yeah.
It's just not obvious.
Yeah. Also, the assessor is usually prompted when they're creating a NatHERS certificate. They're reminded that their assessment needs to comply with the heating and cooling load limits. So in the software, they have sort of either presenting, green is good, red is bad, right? And then also when you upload this, there's a sort of like a reminder that says, oh, by the way, just make sure that you're checking that it complies with the heating and cooling load limits. And that still happens today. You still get this prompt.
Yeah, trouble with prompts is, and I know I'm guilty of it.
Oh, you just click OK.
Yeah, you're just so used to seeing them. You just, just tap, tap, keep going through. You need something flashing, hey, this doesn't work.
I think it's a little bit more obvious in some NatHERS software tools than another that you comply or you don't comply.
That is definitely correct. Yeah, and obviously there are instances if you're doing renovations, extensions where it wouldn't apply, or it's different metrics that you need to adhere to. So again, when you select whether it's a new house or renovation extension, maybe it could, be a hard stop. Let's just summarize what we've covered. That for anybody who, again, is not doing NatHERS assessments but wants to look at the certificates, wants to work out how we've come to the conclusions that we've come to, there's 3 metrics that we need to comply with. It's the heating load, the cooling load, and the total load. Everybody focuses on the total load, which is the star rating, but there are those 2 other metrics, the heating load and the cooling load. The heating load and cooling load differs depending on what your climate zone of the project is. 69 different NatHERS climate zones, different heating and cooling loads, and also what the lowest floor type is of the project, which is selectable within the NatHERS software. Now, what that conditioning is, it is any conditioned area in the dwelling. We're pretty certain that it's any conditioned area in the dwelling, and whatever that lowest conditioned area is, that's what you're going to select in the NatHERS software.
That's our interpretation today.
Works for me.
Excellent. That was a quick episode tonight, very intense, but that wraps up this episode of The Rating Room. Thanks for joining myself, Matthew and Andrew, as we uncovered another corner of the NatHERS world. Your thoughts, comments and questions are important to us, so leave a message on the NatHERS Assessor Network Facebook page or leave a comment on the video below. And until next time, keep rating. So now what happens if I put a stair on top of the stairwell? Sorry. Cut that. So now...
Can we have an image of that sliding in from